Hello and welcome everybody to the student room and our third application surgery. It's lovely to have you here. For anybody who doesn't know, our application surgeries here on TSR are a live video series that we're running, all dedicated to helping you with your university application, whether you're in year 13 or year 12. Hopefully there's something really relevant here for you today. So just to give you a bit of an introduction, my name is Grace and I'm a community manager here at the Student Room. You may know me better as Strawberry Dreams on site, so if I bumped into any of you on the forums, hello, it's lovely to see you here. If I haven't met you before and you're not a member of the Student Room and it's your first time, well, welcome. We hope you find this session really useful and that you stick around and get involved in some of the other activities that we have here on site. We have lots of forums dedicated to supporting you with school, study help, general life questions, and of course, university and university applications. Also, if you're in year 12 or 13, we have a fantastic newsletter that we can send over to you and get you lots of support and help with anything to do with being a student. So do check the link in the first post of this thread and make sure you sign up for anything on that. So if you're interested, you can keep up to date with all the latest things going on. And now I'm going to introduce our next session. So we've already had two sessions in our application surgeries in which we looked at whether university is right for you and how to make those decisions, and also about researching universities and what you need to do when you're considering going and applying to a certain university. And this session now, we're very lucky and pleased to have UCAS joining us today to talk about how to fill out your application and your university application in general when considering UCAS and all the things around it. So I'm going to introduce Courtney now, Courtney Shepherd, who is a Senior Customer Experience Manager for students at UCAS. So welcome, Courtney. It's lovely to have you here. Would you mind giving me a little bit of an introduction about yourself and what you do at UCAS?
Yes, hi Grace, and hi everybody. Thanks for having me on today. My job title, like Grace said, is Senior Customer Experience Manager for students. Bit of a mouthful. My role kind of looks at everything that UCAS has to do with students, so all the services which we provide, right the way from some of the events which we do through to the support services that if you do need to get in touch with someone on the team, then those are all the guys that I work with. So we try and make quite an important, sometimes stressful process as simple as possible, and look to make improvements throughout the cycle as we go along. And I do some work with TSR and other organizations so that we can really try and unpick some of the problems which you might have and make them go away. And then also make sure that you don't get any of those problems because we've already sorted them out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Courtney. So what's going to happen now is that Courtney is going to give us a really short presentation about general application questions that you may be having and kind of run you through the process in general. And then after that's happened, what we'll do is go straight into the Q&A. I know that some of you have already been really keen and asked a few questions already, which is great. So we'll get around to answering those and any live questions that come in. So now over to Courtney. Thank you so much.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen now, just so that you can see what I'll be talking about. This is going to be quite a brief overview of the UCAS application process. So hopefully you can see my screen okay now. I've kind of grouped this into four main areas of where I think you can kind of start with that research and refining your options. So some of you will probably know exactly what you want to do in terms of the subject, but you're not sure about the uni. Others will know the kinds of unis you want to go to, but you're working out your subjects. And then others, you're probably just like, I want to go to uni. Not sure too much beyond that. So a couple of supporting tips on how to do that. Then I'll go into the application in brief for you. I'm not going to show you loads and loads of screenshots because I'm sure you can have a go at the application yourself, but I'll cover a few of the main parts and tell you what some of those things mean, what happens once your application's with UCAS and the unis, and then finally cover off a few points about exam results and clearing. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the UCAS process, and I'll do my very best to give you the answer that you need. So we'll start with refining off your options. Some of you may or may not have heard of or seen something called the UCAS Hub. It's quite new. For those of you who are applying through to university for the year of entry 2022, you will definitely be using the Hub. And those who are in 2021, you may have just started on that. So you've had some surgeries with TSR about researching your options, and the UCAS Hub is a tool that you can use. There's a bunch of different stuff on here. It's quite busy, and you can configure this to what's important for you and how you want to start that research. And everything will be grouped in one place. So the UCAS process, as we all know, can be a little bit daunting, a bit scary, but actually this helps you get started with that before the actual application process. So you can do some research on subjects, get some useful advice from other students who are already who are already at uni. There's a few discounts and things like that. And of course, a handy tariff calculator where you can look at your UCAS points if that's something you want to check out, and a whole bunch of other stuff on here. So it's important for you to start your research in the right place, whatever works for you, whether it's through your school, through TSR, through UniFrog, whoever that is. Research is so important to get started. So if you want to create an account, you want to have a look, it's just really simple, ucas.com/hub. When you do research, you'll start looking at different courses and different details behind each course. So we can go through something called the Explore feature here that UCAS offers. And, you know, if you're researching things for your personal statement or you're wanting to find out a bit more about the kind of detail that you will be studying for your chosen subject, it's a really good place to start. And then you can go onto the uni's websites to get some more detailed information. But the reason why I mentioned personal statements is quite often we get asked what makes the best starting line for my personal statement, what should I include? And the very first place you need to start with that personal statement is always about research. And this section here on UCAS, and there are other places where you can do this, gives you a really good starting point. You can start to build up your research, get it really clear in your mind about what it is that you want to study, and then jot down some notes around why it is you want to study that particular subject, and then that can start building out the contents of your personal statement. So we also have a bunch of Hub Live sessions, and I really wanted to get a better image of this, but you've got me on the screen, and apologies again for that. I've been hosting loads of these Hub Live sessions, and these are within the Hub, and we've done lots of subject-specific ones, particular deadlines. So maybe if you're applying for Oxford and Cambridge, we had some people from Oxford and Cambridge where I hosted a panel discussion similar to this, and we got them to answer your questions. Likewise for medicine, dentistry, veterinary courses, debunking league tables, all sorts of different things. And they are videos which you can watch back if you wanted to. And we do host these as well on a regular basis, where we can just get your questions and put them to people in the know. And I usually host those. So there's a whole bunch of things there as well for you to look at. Now, we talked briefly about the personal statement. There's a few different places where they are personal statement builders, and whichever one works best for you. There's one on UCAS, and this one is linked with your Hub account. So you can start chunking up the personal statement into those different sections and then writing your draft, write 1, 2, 3, 4 drafts, whatever that is, until you get your final version, which you need to transfer to the UCAS application itself. The important part about the personal statement on a really basic level is it needs to be 47 lines or 4,000 characters max, whichever one is met first. If you're using a word processing package like Microsoft Word or Notepad or something like that, the character count doesn't always match directly with Word and then the UCAS application. So you have to make it fit on the UCAS application. I know there are a couple of questions at the end, which we'll come to, about personal statements. This is such a really important part of your application. It's one of the only parts of the application that you have full control over. You're writing about yourself, your experience, your curiosity and passion for the subject that you want to go on and study. And this could be the difference between you being considered or given an offer against somebody else because of a really strong, well thought through, well crafted personal statement. Now, there's plenty of resources out there for you to do that. But on the basic side of it, you need to have that personal statement completed within the parameters of the UCAS system. The other thing to note is the UCAS system goes through copy checks. So we look for plagiarism within the personal statement. So it's super important that you do all of your own work. You don't copy someone else's, you don't download something from the internet. And we will go through that and we'll flag that to the universities if we find any similarities. So it's a good thing, because if you are writing all of your own work, it is unique and the universities will know that. Of course, if you're copying somebody else's, then they'll also know that. So doing your own work is really, really important. So the UCAS application process in a nutshell, like I said, I'm not going to go through loads of screenshots for you and tell you all about what it is. There's plenty of resources available for you to do that. However, I'm just going to run through each of these sections very, very briefly for you. You've got personal details. Now that does what it says on the tin. That's all about you, contact information, email address, date of birth, that kind of stuff. It's really, really simple. That's also where you need to list out any finance arrangements. So are you going to get funded from student finance, or are you going to be funding this yourself, or are you getting bursaries from the NHS, that type of thing. There are options, there are drop downs for you to select, and it should be relatively clear. If it isn't, there's a help text option where you can find out a bit more information. If you're a UK student, you'll get an additional details section, and this asks for some diversity and monitoring and diversity and inclusion monitoring questions, some of which are mandatory, most of which are optional. And you can put things like your religion and other areas which are useful for statistical purposes, and also might inform the university on different ways in which they can help support you. They will only see that information once you have an unconditional firm place. So once you've got your place secured, that means there's no bias with any of the offer making or when they consider your application. We have the choices section, and that's where you list down all of the different choices within your application. So you can have up to 5. However, if you're applying for a medicine, dentistry or veterinary course, you can have a maximum of 4. And then you can add a 5th choice of something else. Often medicine students would add something like biomedical science, and you can add that as a top up to have your 5 choices if you want. If you're applying for Oxford or Cambridge, you can only have 1 of Oxford or Cambridge. There's a very small cohort of people who are applying for graduate medicine who are able to have both. But if it's just general courses at either one of those universities, you're only able to select 1 of them. When you do your choices, as long as you're ahead of the deadline, you can submit your UCAS application with 3 choices and then add 2 more if you wanted later on down the line. They don't all have to be at the same time. These courses are not in any preference order either. So when you list them on your application, they're just in random order. So don't worry if your first choice was, I don't know, the University of Gloucestershire, for example, and you wanted that one to be at the top and it isn't. Doesn't matter. The university will only see that you've applied to them, something called invisibility. So your application will go to your 5 different choices and they'll only see that you've applied to them, which means they consider you within their own right. You then move on to your education section. This is where you put all formal qualifications that you've received from the age of 16, where you've got a certificate, you list them down. So some of you might have been did your exams this summer, received those centre assessed grades. You might also be doing the autumn series or applying again for 21 entry, and you want to know how you need to list down your A-levels if you're retaking them again. Short answer is you need to list the ones that you got for your centre assessed grades, and then again with the ones that you're going to be doing later on this year, but you list them with the grades as pending. So essentially it's listed there twice, and the universities will consider the higher of the grades once you get those. Okay, then employment. So this is a lovely chance for you to enter any paid or voluntary work experience that you've done. Now, this can be a really good place to just list some of the things that you've done and then not clog up your personal statement with things which might not be relevant to the course you're applying to. Of course, if you haven't got anything there, you don't have to fill in that section. You can just leave it blank. It's fine. We've got the personal statement. We've covered that one. Like I said, 47 lines or 4,000 characters, whichever one is met first. There's no spell check. There's no formatting. So make sure you get other people to read that through and check it for you. And then, of course, your reference. So your reference needs to be done generally by someone who knows you in an academic capacity. It's probably someone within your school or your college. Or if you're later on in life, you're applying as a mature student, someone who you've worked with, or perhaps someone who can provide you a sound character reference as long as they're not a family member or close friend, that's fine. This is also the section where your predicted grades will be entered. And if this is done by, if you've got pending qualifications, obviously, generally this is done by your school or your college, and they'll do it for you. You won't be able to see the reference if you're applying through your school or college, nor will you be able to see the predicted grades either. You can get that from UCAS later on down the line if you really want it. So some important dates to consider. These dates don't actually change whichever cycle you're applying for. So if you're going for 2021 entry, obviously the October 15th deadline has passed. But if you're applying for 2022 entry, then these are the dates which you need to focus on. January 15th is the deadline where the vast majority of courses have their deadlines. So it's really important that you get your application in by 6 o'clock in the evening, UK time, to UCAS on the 15th or earlier. What this means is, as long as you get your application in by that date, you are guaranteed equal consideration alongside everyone else who gets their application in then. If you miss the deadline and you apply later, it's absolutely still possible to do so. However, your application will probably be considered at the bottom of the pile, and everyone who's applied before you will get considered first. So it's always worth double checking with the unis before you submit any late applications for whatever reason. You'll have some dates that you will see on track or your application when you get to them. And these are the reply by dates. So the universities will all have specific dates when they need to give you offers by and make decisions by. And you will then in turn have a date where you need to reply to your offers by. So we at UCAS will send you text messages, emails, get in touch and remind you when these are, and these will be very clearly stated on track and on your application. So you just need to make sure you do that. You reply by the date shown. Otherwise, UCAS will decline that by default, which you don't really want. So we obviously can rectify that if needed. And then the 30th of June deadline. So this is the last date where you could submit an application with choices. If you apply after that, you go directly into clearing. So just a few things for you to be aware of. So what happens once you go through the whole application process, you fill everything in, you've met the deadline, fantastic, then what? Well, you go on to something where it's called track at the moment. In the future, it'll all be in one place called your application in the hub. But this will be where you see any offers that come through or invitations to interview if the unis do that through UCAS. So there's three main offer types that you'll see. One is a conditional offer. So this is generally academic conditions that you need to meet. So you need to get 3 A's and a B with a B in English, for example, or whatever that might be. You might need to get a certain number of points for your IB or grades within your Welsh back or Scottish Higher, whatever that is. This is where you'll see those academic conditions. And generally, if you do need to meet other conditions like a DBS check or anything to do with health and medical checks, if that's the vocation that you're going into, those will be listed within the conditions of the offer, but you probably won't have to meet those until maybe at a later date. You could get an unconditional offer, and that's where you're good to go. You've got an unconditional offer if you accept that and you've got your place, or if things don't go according to plan, you'll be made unsuccessful. So what happens after that? Your universities and colleges will view your application, consider you, and see what kind of offers they want to give you. Like I say, you'll see the deadline when you need to reply to your offers by. And then UCAS will receive exam results. If you've got listed qualifications which are pending, UCAS will be able to receive those results directly from the examining boards. We don't have that for every single examining board or for every qualification, but we do for the vast majority of UK qualifications. We receive those, we pass them on to the unis for you, and they will use that to inform decisions as to whether or not you get an unconditional offer or not. Your application will be frozen for a short period whilst we process those results, depending on which results you have and which results day is pertinent to you. But that just means we're keeping everything secure in the background whilst we receive those big data files from the examining boards and then pass those on to the unis so they can make the decisions for you. And then the penultimate slide here is just looking at clearing and adjustment. So if you do end up in clearing, it could be either by design or it could be by circumstance. So clearing is available for everybody who has not received any offers or you've decided to decline your unconditional firm choice. So clearing begins from the early July. It's usually around the 4th or 5th of July. Or if you apply after the 30th of June, you'll go directly into clearing. This means that you won't be able to choose a number of different options when you submit your application, but you'll be able to do that later on down the line. There's lots and lots of information about clearing all over the show, and different websites will show universities and colleges which have got vacancies through clearing. And the way clearing works is you contact your chosen uni or college and see if they've got any vacancies. And then you have like a mini interview when you talk to them, whether that's maybe via live chat or on the phone. And they'll say to you, okay, cool, we'll make you an offer. More often than not, it's time bound. So they'll say you need to add us as a clearing choice on UCAS within 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever that is. You can collect as many of those offers as you want, but then when you decide which choice you want, you're only able to add one clearing choice. That's when you do it on your UCAS application. We introduced something new in 2020 this year, and will be the same for 2021, called Clearing Plus. So if you do find yourself in clearing and you're just not sure what options are out there, your application will be matched to different university courses based on your achieved grades, based on the subject that you've applied for, the geography that you've applied for, if that's relevant. And then you'll see a list of different courses which are available, and you can express interest in those. Essentially fast tracks the clearing process, and you might get some offers a bit quicker that way. But it's to give you some options, and it's really important to do your research in the traditional clearing way as well, but it also helps you with some additional options that you might not have thought about. You may have heard about adjustment. This is for those who have met and exceeded the conditions of their original unconditional firm place. So it's quite a really narrow parameters for that. But if you've done better than expected on your unconditional firm place and you want to have a nose around and see what else is available, you can register for adjustment. Your unconditional firm place won't be affected. And then if you do get a place at somewhere that's got a higher entry requirements than you initially had applied to, they can accept you, and they do all of that. They handle that all for you, and it's job done, nice and easy. The final kind of thing which you might get through the clearing process is something called an unconditional course change. It might be that the course isn't available. It might be that the university thought you weren't quite suited to the original course you applied to, and they'll put through something called an unconditional course change. That will show on track, and then you can choose whether or not you accept that, or you go to your insurance choice, or you could just decline it completely and go straight into clearing. But you might see that as well. After that, that's done. You're pretty much done with UCAS. You'll be able to see your confirmation letters, your status codes if you want to open a student bank account. And then you go on and enroll and wait for the university to come, the information to come from the university for you. And that's really that. Quite a quick canter through all of that for you. If you do need a hand with any of your application-based queries, I know the Student Room have got some excellent advisors to help you, but if you need anything else, you can come through to us on Facebook, Twitter, give us a call. We're trying to do our best to help you and reduce those difficult barriers that you might be finding with the application process. So that's that, and on to any questions which you have, and I'll do my very best to answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much, Courtney. That was a really, really useful presentation. I'm sure so many students here are going to find that really helpful. So thank you. As I said, we've got lots of questions that have already come through, and you guys are still putting your questions in now. Thank you so much. We're going to try and get through as many as we possibly can, so do keep them coming, and we'll see if we can get yours answered as well. If not, some of our lovely volunteers are on site and will be able to help support with any questions that don't get answered at the end. So don't worry, we'll try and get your question answered as much as we can. So to start off with, we've had a question in, and excuse my username pronunciation for everything in advance, Thanos34 asking, how can I apply for 2 different courses at the same university? Is this something that you would suggest? They're pretty different courses, but I really love the uni and I want to go there and I want to give myself the best chance of getting in. What do you think?
So the UCAS process will let you do that. That's the first thing, but I would really stress to double check with the uni first to make sure that they are their policies allow you to apply for more than one course with them. Some universities are quite picky about that, and they'll only let you have one choice, and then they might change the subject that you have applied to based on their consideration and conversation with you. So that's the first thing to do. If they say yes, then absolutely, that's good to go. You can do that. And the UCAS application will let you. You'll have to consider your personal statement and what that means. The good thing is, I suppose, that it's at the same uni, but you'll have maybe 2 different subject areas. So depending on your other choices, you'll need to work out where you put the most emphasis within your personal statement on. Of course, you've only got one personal statement, so that's something to think about. And when you do speak to the university about that, they'll be able to give you some advice. This does happen. Of course, it does happen. Lots of students do this. So first point of call, I think, is check with the uni before you submit your UCAS application. You don't want to waste one of those choices unnecessarily.
Perfect. I think that's definitely something that everybody should be considering with anything like this. Always just double check with the university, just in case. You never want to waste a choice. So that's some really great advice. Perfect. Now on to the next question. We mentioned briefly about personal statements. So we're going to have a bit of a kind of mix of different questions here. So we've had someone's coming in and saying, you know, I've not really got any extracurriculars, not really involved in anything at the moment, not got work experience due to lockdown, which I think is something really common amongst lots of people at the moment. Would you suggest that I write in personal statement and attempt to make it a little bit more interesting?
So many of you will be in this exact same position. You had plans to do specific work experience. You had plans to do maybe some extracurricular stuff, which you just weren't able to do. And that's okay. That's absolutely fine. The most important thing for you to do within your personal statement is to focus on additional research, further reading, show some evidence about how you've gone over and above to research about the course you want to apply to, and evidence that. So whether that's through YouTube videos, TED Talks, reading lists from the university, or if it's something that you've done within your community to bring a bit of color and a bit of life to your application, those are the kinds of things which you can include in your personal statement. What I wouldn't do is try and write some stuff to make it a bit more interesting for the sake of writing that. I definitely would advise against that. You'd rather have more information about your research and activities that you've done in terms of using your initiative and being curious about the subject. Rather do that than using some of that space with a bit of perhaps blagging it a bit. You don't want to do that.
That's some really good advice. I think so often it's about, you know, making sure that you show a real expertise and passion for that subject, and that can take up a really big portion of your personal statement, more than you actually think it would do. So yeah, that's really helpful. Having a look now at something a little bit more technical. So we've got Ben PNP here, who said, I haven't been in formal education for a few years. I'm struggling to find a UCAS referee as I can't use my last employer. Do you have any advice on what they could do?
Yeah, so again, there will be people in that same situation. So the referee doesn't have to be an employer. It doesn't have to be somebody who is can do that in an academic sense. Your referee needs to be somebody who can write you a character reference outlining your suitability to the course that you want to go on and study. So it could be somebody that you've worked with in a professional capacity. That wasn't necessarily work, it could be volunteering. But if you're really, really stuck on that, I would suggest, again, you speak to the uni that you're interested in applying to, and they'll give you a flavor of how important the reference is in their admissions process. And they can give you a steer on who can do that for you. But as long as it's not someone who's a relative or really close friend of yours, then you can explore different avenues for your reference. It doesn't have to be an employer.
Perfect, thank you so much. And looking now at kind of requirements and offers, I know that people are starting to get their applications in, starting to get some offers back now. Somebody has asked, so F. Pasha said, what happens if you don't meet a university's entry requirements? What are the likelihoods of still getting an offer if you apply for something that maybe is a little bit higher than your predicted grades are?
Really good question, that, actually. And I think this year we'll probably see universities being more flexible than ever before, at least at the offer stage for certain. I'd really recommend when you're looking at the different choices that you've got for your application that you choose one or two which are quite aspirational, that will stretch you, that might be a bit higher than your predicted grades, because you never know what those predicted grades exactly are. Just predicted, they're not guaranteed, and your hard work and effort might well actually change that once you get your results. So that you absolutely can still apply for somewhere which has got higher entry requirements than what your predicted grades are, within reason. I think if you're predicted 3 Cs and you go for somewhere which has got 3 A stars as the minimum entry requirement, you're probably not going to get much joy there. So within reason, but I would also double check that the entry requirements haven't got any specific criteria that you won't meet, i.e. particular subjects, or if you have to have done work experience or things like that. Make sure that you know what you're getting into when you apply for those choices. But definitely one or two of your choices, make them aspirational. It will push you to study harder, to work harder, and you might well surprise yourself with a nice offer.
Perfect, thank you so much. And now having a look at, again, something a little bit more technical. So next student has said, what are UCAS tariff points and how do they relate to A-level grades?
So UCAS tariff points, lots of students get quite hung up on these and think that they are really, really important. So the grades that you get for your qualifications are far more important than UCAS points. The UCAS points are used by about, well, it's less than a third of the universities now as part of their entry requirements. The tariff points are assigned to different qualifications, and they're not all qualifications either. So you might get an A in your A-level and it'd be worth X amount of points. You'll get 3 merits within your BTEC would be worth a certain amount of points. And sometimes universities will say that their offers or their minimum entry requirements will be 120 tariff points, for example. And you can make that up by different qualifications which are included within the tariff, and you can get that by using the tariff calculator. So things like some music qualifications have got a few tariff points against them. Your A-levels, of course, do. Your IB does. Your Welsh Bac. All of those qualifications add up to tariff points. So if a university is very specifically saying they're only including tariff points as their entry requirements, you can actually meet that through a whole different number of qualifications. It doesn't have to just be your A-levels or your level 3 qualifications. I would just be really mindful that check the entry requirements and don't get too hung up on the number of tariff points or that kind of language. It's like I say, less than a third of the unis actually use tariff points as their entry requirements. The grades are far more important.
Perfect, thank you so much. I didn't realise it was only a third of universities still using tariff points. I think that's really helpful to remember, so thank you. On to the next couple of questions. I know we're pushing a little bit over time here, but I know that there are so many questions coming through, so I'm just going to try and get as many in as I can. Sorry, Courtney, in advance.
No, go for it.
We've had a couple of questions about the job section and employment section on the UCAS application form. So do universities kind of really look at that when considering places? Is it better for the UCAS application if you've had a job or some kind of work experience? What do you think?
So the universities will take into account your whole application. If you don't have any employment history or work experience, then they won't consider that because it's not there. And if you do, then it would probably only be considered if it's actually relevant to the course you're wanting to apply to. So that's kind of the bottom line of this. And it's a section within the application which you can populate if you've got that experience. But if you don't, I wouldn't worry about it. And it's like I said earlier, only some courses really require you to have specific work experience, and those are usually the vocational courses. This year, with the pandemic having hit us, the requirement and having that work experience is even less now. What's more important is demonstrating your further research and reading in your personal statement. So I wouldn't worry too much if that's something that's really concerning you. Again, double check those entry requirements, focus on your personal statement rather than thinking that you have to have some sort of employment.
Perfect, thank you so much. And we're going to end on a couple of personal statement questions here because we've had so many come through. So we've had one from La Suji who said, I'm only in year 12, but when do you suggest that I start doing my personal statement?
Well, you're clearly on the right track if you're thinking about it now. already. So you've got some time within the next few months to do some research and to plan out your activities. I'd really suggest that you start making notes about what you want to include within your personal statement, probably from March, April time next year. Ready. So that means you've got loads of time to start building up that evidence. You could start earlier if you wanted. You can use your summer of 2021. Hopefully it'll be a bit more of a freer summer than what we've just had. But even if it isn't, you can use that time to do your further research and reading and use that time to build up that evidence. Write down notes, write down loads of notes. And when it comes to what makes the best opening line, well, through all of your research, something will really stick in your head around, I watched a TED talk and I saw this person talking about this, and that's really inspired me to continue further research. It could be something like that. So take notes, that's really important, but I wouldn't worry about trying to actually write that personal statement until a few months' time.
Perfect, thank you. And last question, just the last personal statement one, just so we can get some time in. We've had kind of a couple of questions on a similar line, one from Olivia Kate 4 and Coffee Rush 24. What's the best way to write a conclusion for your personal statement? What's the best way to kind of wrap it all up? It can feel a bit daunting.
Yeah, and I was doing loads and loads of personal statement workshops earlier in the last couple of weeks, and the two common questions were, how do I start it? How do I finish it? And that's really, it is difficult, and it's okay to be difficult because it's an important piece of work. So the best way to finish up your personal statement is you've obviously got your introduction, your main body of research, and you've probably written a little bit about yourself, your hobbies, your interests. It's the best way to do it is to wrap it up by, I'm really looking forward to embracing the culture of the university. I'm really looking forward to learning more about law, or I've got future career aspirations as a teacher, and I'm looking forward to starting my journey on that. That's probably the best way to do it. So make it a forward-looking statement about your studies, about your education, the next step on your journey. And I wouldn't worry too much if it just feels a bit odd around, it doesn't fit that well. The universities are well aware that you've got a certain amount of space to fit in all of this passion, this interest, this curiosity. So something that just sums it up nicely. Why are you looking forward to that course, that uni, that next step on your journey? That's that.
Perfect. So I think that's a good place to actually wrap up our own Q&A. So thank you so much for taking part in this, Courtney. We've really appreciated all your help and advice. For anybody else who is watching the Q&A, got some more personal statement questions, I know so many have come through. We're actually hosting a dedicated personal statement session next week. So next Thursday at 5 p.m, same as always, live at 5 during November. And that will be with the University of Surrey, and they're coming in and they're going to give a kind of dedicated personal statement workshop, answering all your personal statement questions then. So do join us back then. But thank you so much to everybody who's asked a question, who's got involved, who's watching the video. It's been fantastic to have you. We hope to see you next week. And thank you again to Courtney for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks, everyone. Bye.